The courtroom was already tense, the kind of tension that sat on your chest like a weight, the kind that made even the seasoned reporters stop tapping their pens and look up. But no one was ready for what happened next. When the judge opened the sealed envelope marked Supplemental Exhibit E and read aloud the name Lori Harvey, the room didn't erupt, but it didn't need to. The reaction was quiet, visceral. Eyes widened, jaws locked. One juror actually whispered, "No way." Even the court stenographer hesitated, fingers hovering over the keys as if their brain needed a second to catch up. It was not because Lori Harvey had ever been mentioned before she hadn't. Not officially. Sure, there had been whispers, half-spoken theories, a few speculative YouTube clips pieced together by people with too much time and blurry screenshots, but that was internet chatter. This was a federal courtroom. This was under oath. This was the moment the narrative shifted. What had been a case about Diddy Combs' offshore transfers, encrypted communications, and eerily loyal inner circle had now taken a sharp turn into celebrity territory no one thought would be touched. Lori Harvey was America's sweetheart, the untouchable face of elegance, the daughter of a beloved talk show host, and up until that moment, completely uninvolved. But now her name sat on record, echoed in the room, lodged into the transcript and the minds of everyone watching. Diddy Comb didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He didn't even twitch. That was its own kind of confession. But his legal team moved fast. One attorney leaned over and whispered urgently in his ear, while another began flipping through a thick folder, scanning pages with a kind of desperation that only comes when the script has gone off track. The judge looked up again, his voice calm but pointed. "I take it this isn't news to the defense?" No one replied. The prosecutor, now standing with the poise of someone holding a royal flush, lifted a fresh folder. "Your Honor," he began, "we are entering evidence that directly connects Miss Harvey to Mr. Comey during the critical fiscal window now under federal investigation. This includes flight manifests, financial records, and a chain of encrypted text messages extracted from a device seized 2 weeks ago." The ripple that ran through the room was more than interest. It was anticipation mixed with dread, not just because of who Lori was, but because of what she represented: a clean face, a famous name, a person the public had been trained to trust, and now she was being named, not as a footnote, but as a potential participant. The messages weren't vague. One in particular read, "We're safe at the beach house. I'll have her fly out in the morning. Don't use the usual staff." It was signed simply with an initial L, but the prosecution had no doubt. The device it came from had been linked via a unique ID to Lori Harvey's travel logs, synced email account, and backup server, all verified through a federal cyber forensics team. And that beach house wasn't just any luxury retreat. It had already come up twice in unrelated testimony, both times as a location used for undocumented meetings and untraceable cash handovers. This message placed her not only in proximity, but in facilitation. The judge's brow furrowed as he read further. "Are you alleging she was complicit?" he asked. "We're saying," the prosecutor answered, "that she was present consistently during key activities now under scrutiny." The gallery erupted into frantic scribbling. A CNN correspondent was seen texting live from her lap. Legal analysts whispered theories that sounded like movie plots. But the prosecution wasn't done, not even close. "Let the record show," the lead prosecutor continued, "that a set of 47 messages between Mr. Combs and Miss Harvey reference third-party payments, asset movement, and use of alternate identities." In one, Mr. Commies instructs her not to fly commercial and to use the Miami crew. The judge nodded slowly, absorbing. Do we have confirmation of that travel? A tech analyst stood and confirmed the jet charter manifest. Gulfstream G650. Passenger name, Lori Harvey. Departure, Teterboro. Destination, private airstrip, Florida. The flight coincided precisely with the flagged $2.1 million asset relocation via shell company tied to Diddy Combs International Holdings. And then the room chilled. No social media posts were made during that trip. No paparazzi photos, no digital footprint. The prosecutor clicked to the next slide. This is what we believe was intentional discretion, strategic invisibility. A second message flashed onto the monitor. Don't bring your phone, no jokes, no staff with cameras. I'll explain when you land. Again, the signature L. The judge leaned back. Is there evidence she knew the purpose of these meetings? The prosecutor's response was simple. She was copied on messages referencing wire transfers, burner phones, and staff rotation policies. She helped coordinate privacy protocols. At best, she knew enough to hide it. At worst, she knew everything. Diddy Comb finally moved, a slight shift in his chair. Not fear fatigue. His empire had been pristine for decades, untouchable. But this was blood in the water. Because if someone like Lori Harvey was part of it, or even just present with intent, then the scale of the machine was bigger than anyone imagined. This wasn't a scandal anymore. It was a system. The courtroom recessed early that afternoon, but no one really left. People lingered, whispering, replaying the moment the judge said her name. Lori Harvey. It didn't sound accusatory. It sounded historical, like the moment a line is crossed and history divides itself into before and after. When the court reopened the next morning, everything had changed. A new layer of security was added, not for safety, but for order. The line between trial and spectacle had blurred. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Because now the trial wasn't just about a mogul and his money. It was about the people who helped him stay untouchable. And Lori Harvey, once America's most untouchable face, had just stepped onto the record. The morning light filtering into the courtroom didn't soften the atmosphere, it sharpened it. The air felt charged, thick with unspoken curiosity, and something darker. No cameras were allowed inside, but every seat was filled, including those at the far back, usually reserved for low-level clerks and quiet observers. Today they were occupied by entertainment attorneys, off-duty agents, and publicists whose clients had once stood next to Lori Harvey on red carpets, now craning their necks to see how close her name would get to the flame. The prosecution stepped forward without theatrics, holding only a folder marked Exhibit 74. No one expected the contents to be what they were. The lead prosecutor placed a USB on the evidence table, nodded once, and began, "Today we will review patterns, not allegations, not assumptions, but patterns supported by timestamps, financial traces, and confirmed communications." With a single click, the screen lit up behind Shaddam, revealing a simple chart. It wasn't flashy. It was cold, methodical. It showed 6 months of transactions, flight paths, and property bookings all tied to the same name, Lori Harvey. At first glance, it looked like a well-managed influencer calendar, Turks and Caicos, St. Bart's, Miami, Aspen. But underneath each trip was a mirrored layer: fund transfers, offshore account withdrawals, LLC movement, and untraceable service charges. "We are not saying Miss Harvey orchestrated this system," the prosecutor said, his voice steady, "but we are showing that her name became essential to it functioning." He paused. "Without her, the machine had to slow down, adapt. With her, it flowed freely." Then came the screenshots. Encrypted messages between Diddy and a user linked to Lori's known alias. "Is she bringing the bag to L.A. or Miami?" the first one read. The second, time-stamped just hours later. "You said no regular names, so I told her to book it under mine." A visible wave rolled through the courtroom. The defense tried to object, but was overruled. The judge leaned forward. "Continue," he said quietly. The prosecution introduced the digital forensics expert. Her tone was even, her confidence clinical. "We correlated financial events with Miss Harvey's known travel dates. In 3 separate instances, we saw significant funds moved within hours of her confirmed arrival at flagged properties." Slide by slide, she presented the data. March 11th, $340,000 moved via shell company. 6 hours later, a villa in the Turks and Caicos booked under her name. May 26th, $190,000 wired to a private jet charter registered under a variation of Lori's legal name. June 18th, $1.2 million withdrawn and redirected into an offshore Caribbean account on the same day Lori was documented arriving at a Miami estate under federal surveillance. The courtroom stayed quiet, but not from lack of emotion. It was the kind of silence that meant everyone was listening hard, afraid to miss a single beat. Then came a wrinkle. 2 weeks ago, the forensic analyst added, a former travel coordinator for Miss Harvey received a cease and desist letter from Mr. Kama's legal team. This occurred shortly after our office began tracing booking records tied to her alias. The judge narrowed his eyes. "A silencing attempt?" "The timing is suspicious, Your Honor," she replied, "especially since that coordinator's calendar entries filled in the gaps our own database had missed." The defense objected. "Speculative." The judge overruled. "This isn't speculation, it's sequence." Next came testimony from a former assistant someone who had worked for both Diddy and Lori's styling team during her travel-heavy months. She didn't look afraid. If anything, she looked relieved. "Lori didn't ask questions," she said. "She followed instructions. She liked the perks. He liked that her name never raised red flags." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean by perks?" "Private jets, villas, a wardrobe sent in advance. But the important thing wasn't what she got. It was what she gave a clean face." The judge asked, "Clean?" "No scandals, no surveillance, no suspicion. She could book places his circle couldn't without triggering alerts." That sentence hung in the air like smoke, staining everything. Then, with the same cold efficiency, the prosecution shifted the frame. "Let the record show," the prosecutor said, "that from January to June, Miss Harvey's phone number registered under alias exchanged over 300 encrypted messages with Mr. Comey's device." The jury visibly shifted. The implication was no longer proximity. It was participation. The prosecution presented one final detail: a subpoenaed manifest for a Gulfstream jet. Only one passenger was listed, Lori Harvey. But the twist? No public record of the trip, no social media, no paparazzi. And yet, that night, 2 men currently indicted for financial conspiracy arrived at the very same estate, unannounced, undocumented, except by federal surveillance. Then came a surprise. A new witness, anonymous, a concierge from a villa service. His voice was altered, identity protected. We were told to rotate staff daily. Never let anyone stay more than 2 nights in a row. She arrived before him. We were instructed to disable all internal cameras. "Do you recognize this woman?" the prosecutor asked, showing a blurry image. "Yes, that's her, Lori Harvey. She signed the guest ledger herself." The courtroom's temperature seemed to drop a degree. The judge took a long breath. So, the security procedures weren't to protect her from paparazzi. "No, sir. They were to prevent familiarity. No one could know too much." And then, perhaps the most disturbing phrase of the day, she was the system's invisibility cloak. The phrase didn't come from a witness or an attorney. It came from a journalist in the gallery whispering into their recorder. But it summarized everything. Lori wasn't an outsider drawn in. She was the thread woven in from the start, the layer of silk that made the steel beneath it go unnoticed. By the time the court recessed for lunch, the prosecution had painted a chilling image not of a woman unaware, but of a woman indispensable, someone whose silence had protected more than herself, someone whose presence had become the alibi for an empire. She wasn't just there. She made it all look normal. That was her role. And now, the courtroom knew it. When the courtroom reconvened, the atmosphere was different. Not tense, not curious. It was something colder, clinical, like everyone had stepped into an autopsy, not of a body, but of an illusion. The prosecution resumed with no theatrics, just a manila folder marked Exhibit 75. It contained something simple but devastating. An email sent from Lori Harvey's personal address to a logistics coordinator. It read, "Please make sure none of the staff is allowed to bring phones. I don't want anything showing up online while we're there." There were no emojis, no casual language, just instructions. Specific, sharp, intentional. The prosecutor didn't explain it. He didn't need to. The jury saw it for what it was, an active decision to manage perception, to restrict visibility. It wasn't just discretion, it was operational control. Then came the digital forensic team again, this time with screenshots from internal router logs. The Miami estate used during one of the transactions had a smart access system. Only 2 users had override credentials during the flagged period. One was Diddy, the other, Lori Harvey. The judge raised an eyebrow, leaned forward, and asked, "And what does override mean in this context?" The tech expert responded, "It grants unrestricted access to all rooms, including off-floor plan areas used to house encrypted servers and storage." The gallery inhaled collectively. Even the stenographer typed slower. The prosecutor turned to the jury and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are no longer discussing presence. We are discussing access, control, trust. Miss Harvey didn't stumble into these rooms. She unlocked them." That's when the defense finally stood, clearing their throat with a rehearsed sense of outrage. "Your Honor, this is all circumstantial. Proximity does not equal guilt. These are high-end properties with high-end security. Miss Harvey had legitimate reasons to be there as a public figure, as a guest." The judge stared at the defense table. "Then why, counsel, were her travel records buried under aliases and LLCs?" No answer came. The prosecutor didn't press. He let the weight of silence do the work. And then, just when the room was starting to settle, another exhibit was introduced this time from the Department of Homeland Security. A grainy thermal image captured by drone surveillance. 2 silhouettes. One was pacing. the other standing still with her hair in a high bun, unmistakable body language. Cross-referenced with marina footage taken earlier that day, it showed Lori disembarking a boat in the same outfit seen in the drone capture. Same day, same location, same estate. There was no denying it anymore. Then came a chilling detail. Diddy had arrived on the other side of the island, boated in after dark. "Why separate arrivals?" the prosecutor asked. "Why not together?" The silence that followed suggested the answer everyone feared. It was coordinated. It was designed to not be seen. One message, pulled from Lori's recovered phone, reinforced that dread. Sent to an event planner, it read, "Don't list my name on anything. Say it's for Harvey Group. Cash invoice only. No digital records." And suddenly, her silence outside the courtroom felt weaponized. She hadn't said a word to the media. She hadn't posted a single image. No tweets, no red carpet appearances since the trial began. But inside the courtroom, her name was everywhere on receipts, guest ledgers, flight logs, router access lists, and now, audio recordings. Then came another witness, soft-spoken, unremarkable, a digital coordinator for one of the properties. He spoke slowly, carefully. Miss Harvey's name was used to activate smart lock codes for the internal rooms. Specifically, she accessed the server vault at least 3 separate times. The judge blinked. And this vault, what was stored there? Encrypted routers, backup data, server drives used for private communications. The prosecutor let the words linger. Let the record reflect that Miss Harvey had full administrative clearance during these sessions. And then, the moment that truly shifted the courtroom and audio file. The room dimmed. The clip began. Lori's voice, calm, clear, a little tired. "I'm not trying to know everything. Just tell me what I need to say if anything comes up. You know I'll keep it clean." And the room didn't explode. It imploded. The silence was brutal. One juror leaned forward, both hands on their knees like bracing for a fall. Diddy didn't move. His lawyers were visibly shaken. The prosecutor stood slowly, faced the jury, and said, "We are not arguing that Miss Harvey planned this, but we are proving that she enabled it, quietly, strategically, and now, undeniably." The judge called a recess not out of necessity, but out of gravity. "Everyone in this room," he said, "needs a moment to breathe." Because what had started as a celebrity footnote was now the centerpiece of a federal investigation. And when the court returned, the only question left wasn't whether Lori Harvey was involved. It was how deep she had helped build the silence. When the courtroom doors reopened, the silence wasn't just respectful, it was wary. The kind of silence people kept when walking through the remnants of something sacred that had just been shattered. Every person in that room, from the attorneys to the reporters to the gallery spectators who had once come for spectacle, now understood they were witnessing not a scandal, but a systemic unveiling. The prosecution approached the bench holding a slim folder labeled Exhibit 76, but inside it wasn't a document. It was a witness list, and at the top of that list was a name no one recognized, Mr. Garrison. A man in a gray suit stood, no flash, no celebrity, just competence. He identified himself as a compliance officer for a major financial institution in New York. His job? Monitoring suspicious financial activity tied to high-risk individuals. His tone was unshakable, his testimony chilling. "We flagged 12 transactions over a 4-month period that share a distinct pattern," he said. Each one passed through intermediary accounts and was initiated within hours of Miss Harvey's confirmed travel. He gestured toward the screen. A simple grid appeared. Dates, times, amounts, destinations, nothing dramatic. But as he clicked through them, 48,000, 62,000, 80,000, 31,000, each aligned with a specific flight, villa, or estate stay linked to Lori. The defense leaned forward, whispering. The judge watched, jaw set. "What makes these suspicious?" he asked. Garrison replied without hesitation. "They're staggered just under federal reporting thresholds, designed to move money quickly without tripping alarms. Classic laundering structure hidden behind lifestyle." Then he added, "But what truly raised concern was the receiving account." He clicked again. The next slide showed a wire path, redacted but clearly marked. "This account, registered to Miss Harvey's business manager, received deposits from 3 offshore entities with no public alignment to her endorsement portfolio." The prosecution asked, "Are these brands she publicly represents?" "No, sir, none of them. 2 of the shell entities are tied to Caribbean companies under investigation in earlier Diddy inquiries." The implication was now irrefutable. Lori's accounts were not only receiving irregular money, they were part of a pattern that had triggered federal flags. Still, the defense held their line. Could she have been unaware of these deposits? Garrison answered, "It's possible, but highly unlikely. The deposits were followed by service invoices, concierge, travel, security, each signed off by her assistant, sometimes by her directly." What followed was worse. Another witness entered the courtroom with their face blurred on screen and voice digitally altered. A concierge from a luxury Caribbean estate. Their story was precise. "We were told to prepare the house for someone named Michelle. She arrived first. A man followed hours later." The prosecutor leaned in. "Do you recognize these individuals?" They held up 2 photographs. "Yes, that's the woman who signed in Lori Harvey, and that's the man Mr. Combs." "Any instructions given regarding security?" "Yes. Disable all indoor cameras, rotate staff daily, no one stays more than 2 days." "Why?" "They said they didn't want anyone to get too familiar." The jury shifted again. That phrase echoed. Too familiar. This wasn't caution, it was choreography. It wasn't privacy, it was protocol. The judge asked quietly, "Were there any names used in logs?" The witness nodded. "She signed as L. Harvey. The bookings were always vague, no Brandon, no guests listed, always prepaid, always in cash." Another silence, deep and swallowing, fell over the courtroom. But the prosecution wasn't finished. A final message was introduced, pulled from Lori's encrypted messaging account. Addressed to a logistics manager, it read, "Don't list me on anything. Say it's for Harvey Group. Send cash invoice only. Do not forward digital records." It wasn't a request. It was a directive. Then came the last blow of the day. A private security contractor, released from a non-disclosure agreement by federal order, took the stand. "My assignment," he said plainly, "was to handle Miss Harvey's movement during a 2-week window in the Bahamas. No press, no photos, no external contact." "Who hired you?" "A management agency linked to Mr. Combs." "Did you see them together?" "Not in public, only inside the estate." "Did she comment on security protocol?" "Yes," she said, "that's his rule. No trace." The courtroom froze again. Even Diddy, for the first time, dropped his gaze. The prosecutor didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said slowly, "we are not arguing speculation. We are not painting pictures. We are presenting systems ones that Miss Harvey participated in, sustained and shielded." The judge sat still for a moment before leaning forward. "Let the record reflect that Exhibit 76 establishes direct correlation between Miss Harvey's movements and activities now under federal investigation." Then he looked at the defense table, his voice hardening. "You may continue to argue innocence, but you may no longer argue absence." The courtroom remained still as a glacier. There were no screams, no gasps, just the quiet sound of an illusion collapsing layer by elegant layer. Lori Harvey had once been a symbol of beauty, grace, and discretion. Now, in the eyes of a federal court, she was something else entirely. Not the ghost in the machine, the architect of its silence.